Hello, hello. It is Sunday. Welcome back to GM Prep with Steve. Uh, this is the episode 3. We've been at it for a while. I've been running this since the day it launched, and this week in our game, we actually finished chapter 2. So I thought it was finally a good time for me to come and sort of give you guys the details and the things that I learned while running chapter 2 of this book. And that is what we will cover in its entirety. Chapter 2, Run and Gun, in the Outlaws of Alkenstar's Punks and a Powder Keg. So, real quick, I know originally my filming for this has been a little erratic. Originally envisioned it as like a once every 2 weeks or once a month series. I think based on what happened this week, which is I ran it, and as I saw how it played out, I realized it was better that I waited to do this rather than sort of GM prep stuff I haven't personally run yet. So I think as an adjustment to the plan, from now on, when we finish the chapter in our actual play, I will then schedule a GM prep to cover what I learned in that last chapter and share that knowledge with you. So that will mean sort of a slower release of these videos. And if you are like me running it right now and kind of going through the story, you may get ahead of me. And if you're running it in the future and coming back and finding these videos in the past, it won't really matter that they're 3-4 weeks between chapters, because the information will be there just waiting for you. But what that does mean is, in the meantime, if you do have questions or you do have comments or you're unsure about something in the Outlaws of Alkenstar, I highly suggest you head over to our Discord channel. And if you're in Twitch chat right now, I'll go ahead and make sure to link the Discord link. If you're watching this later on YouTube, click down in the description for the link to our YouTube. We have a whole section dedicated to Outlaws of Alkenstar where you can chat about our live stream that we're doing, or a GM prep channel kind of dedicated to this video series and other GMs who like to hop in and ask questions about their game. We had some cool discussions with Samage today, who was talking about potentially, running it as a magic free versus a full magic option, and the other GMs were able to talk it out and kind of give each other tips and advice. So it's a really cool place to hang out. It's a good way to get a direct line to me between these episodes, especially since they may end up being a little more spaced out than I originally envisioned this series going. So today we're covering Chapter 2, which is, in its overview, it's an escort mission. It's a glorified video game escort mission, which is to escort the alchemist Vashon Gattlebee across the city to the Barrel and Bullet Saloon, while various gangs and bounty hunters from all different factions assault you along the way, and you must make one detour along the path to a strange brewery, an abandoned brewery for some reason, to pick up Vashon's engagement ring from his ex's brewery that is now completely closed. It's a fast-paced chapter. It's full of excitement. You got some chases going on. You got some combats. You got some cool dungeon exploration. So it's got a lot of fun stuff, and you can run it pretty fast-paced. So I know, before we get started, though, I know I plugged the Discord. That's a great place to go to get a hold of me and to get a hold of the other GMs. But this video series would not be possible if not for the patrons that make this channel possible. So I'm going to pop in here real quick. Big thanks to all of our patrons, including David Sims, Jason Irvin, Mikkel Waltz, Mark Paquette, Sandra Wagner, and our newest addition, the first time appearing on this graphic, Derek Southworth, who is a fresh recruit to the Recall Knowledge family. These people make the video possible. If you find the sort of content we're doing here as GMs beneficial, please consider heading on over to our Patreon and subscribing and just helping us do more content like this in the future. Also, Another cool thing that we have there is map packs. We started adding maps every month at least. We're going to be doing a map release from Ricardo, who is a cast member on the channel. He does all the editing, a lot of the tech stuff on the channel. He's been making maps, and last month we posted a map pack basically around Alkenstar, which is you can get a street battle map of Alkenstar that you can use in your game. It's either posted last month or it's coming up this month. We do want to make some kind of Alkenstar focused resources for other GMs that are running this, so that's pretty cool. There are 2 other map packs up, including like a Dock City map and another random collection assortment of maps. Also, if you watch our actual play, we stream live on Wednesday nights. You can see how we incorporate this advice I'm giving you. You have a kind of reference for our game so that you can go in and kind of know what to expect as you're running your own. That streams live on Twitch on every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific. They go up on YouTube a week and a half later on Fridays. If you subscribe to our Patreons, you get them a week early. They hit Patreon a week before YouTube, and you can kind of, a small perk of getting them a little easier, but mostly you're just giving your support to us and getting some awesome map packs in the meantime. So head on over to that and definitely check us out on twitch.tv/recallknowledge and youtube.com/recallknowledge. And Richard, RK Richard RPG in chat, is saying hi and thanking all the patrons for being MVPs. I agree. You guys are awesome. Make sure you join our family. And now that I've got all that out of the way and I've asked you to support us, let's dive headfirst into the content, Chapter 2. And let's start with a little bit of backstory matter. In fact, I'm going to cut over here to the oh, here we go. I'm going to cut over here to the Foundry screen so you can see this awesome graphic we have up here, the Chapter 2 running gun, some cool key art. You can see, they're escorting Gattlebee, dragging him through the Yeast of All Brewery while these Powder Keg Punks and various people are shooting at them. It's a little bit, I guess embellished because this scene doesn't actually happen this way in the books, but it still sets the tone for what's happening. But let's take a minute and talk about some of the factions, the people, and their motivations, and the stuff that is important for you as a GM to know, that some of this information is a little scattered, and you might not actually have it as presented as it maybe should be. So let's start with right here, the poster child. He's on the cover of the book. He's on the cover of the key art. This is Vashon Gattlebee. Who is Vashon? Why is he so important? Well, he's the most sought-after alchemist in the entire city. A few weeks ago, nebulous depending on your campaign's time frame, he created a substance called pyronite. It's very super powerful. It's his replacement for black powder because he does not like black powder. And as he built this sort of dynamite type substance, so it's almost like a little bit dynamite, a little C4-ish. It's meant to be very stable, and you can set off with the fuse. Regardless, he does a demonstration. He goes to Blithier College. He says, "Hey, look, guys, I'm going to show you how powerful this stuff I built is." He took a giant safe, hinged, solid steel door, took a pea-sized drop of this pyronite, put it on the hinge, lit it, and nearly burned down the building itself. The interior of the college, the door flew off, flew into the crowd. The building burned. Everyone had to flee. By Gattlebee's own standards, it was a magnificent failure because he did not calculate that the explosion would be that big with such a small amount. But because the blast was so powerful, he ended up drawing so much attention from many people in the city who now want nothing more than to get this powerful explosive into their hands, including our antagonists for the adventure, Angelique Lovelace and Ambrose Mugland. They both saw this. Mugland was there at the demonstration, and now he wants nothing more than to get Gattlebee's formula into his own hands for his own nefarious plots. plot reasons. Secondly, Phoebe and the Duchess, Phoebe is the person who's giving our PCs their missions. She's working for the Duchess. They want to contain this formula to make sure it doesn't get out because it's such a dangerous thing. They'd rather it be controlled in a safe way by the city rather than Ambrose Muglin, Angelique Lovelace, or anyone else who might export it to the rest of the world. They want to keep this formula under wraps. There's plenty more people that are interested, but for our story purposes, the third party that's interested is another alchemist named Shuma Lysarius. He comes into play during the final chapter of this book in episode 3. He wants Gattlebee, he wants the formula, and he will, he doesn't have the resources the rest of the people do, so he gets a little desperate. And his story sort of comes into play in chapter 3, but he's behind the scenes working. Rich is dipping out now. He's behind the scenes working on what's going on here. So Vashon is holed up in his home, refuses to talk to anyone. He's agreed for the Duchess to be escorted back from his house to the Barrel and Bullet Saloon, but he makes one request: that they escort him by a mysterious brewery called the Yeast of All Brewery. And if the PCs check it out, they don't know why or what's going on, right? Turns out the brewery was his and his ex-girlfriend's ex-wife's. Not entirely clear if he was married, just engaged. I like to imagine they got engaged and then broke it off. This brewery that has since fallen into disrepair, he's meeting his ex there so he can get his engagement ring back. Very secretive about why he's going, but that's why he's going there. And so he forces the PCs to take them through this dangerous spot to this brewery. Vashon, as a person, he's very brash, he's very full of himself, and he's very unapologetic. He sees himself as a genius, kind of above the rest of even the high inventors in Alkenstar. And he's worked his whole life to replace black powder with something that he feels is safer. And a little ironic is this pyronite substance. He's always drawn and always described as having a cigarette in his mouth at all times, always smoking, even as he works with explosives, go figure. And he doesn't want to take his mind off his work. His work is his life, his legacy, all that matters, even as his personal relationships fall apart, even as the whole city wants nothing more than to get his formula. He just wants to make it better. He wants to work on it. He wants to perfect it. He wants to figure out why his calculations are so off and how he can fix it. Basically, feel free to make this guy unlikable. He's not evil, right? He doesn't have a desire to hurt people. He doesn't even look at what he's doing as an explosive or a weapon. He sees it as a tool to elevate Alkenstar to the next level, to get them off the dependency on this unstable, dangerous black powder. And you want your PCs to at least want to save him to an extent, right? He's not likable. They might not be his favorite. Maybe they'll like him, but he really should rub your characters a bit in the roleplay. However, even if for some reason he dies during this thing and he's not given a stat block, for instance, even if he dies, the campaign can still go on. Because, one of the solutions if your party is like really outlaws and they say, hey, if we kill this guy, the formula will never get out. He's the only one that knows the formula. We should just kill him. That's the best way to protect the city. They're not wrong. And if they do that, feel free to roll with it. Just know that the story goes on because the formula gets out through other means, right, that ultimately don't matter if the PCs successfully escort Gattlebee or not. One cool thing here to keep in mind, it's mentioned kind of in passing, Vashon Gattlebee is his entire experience is sort of colored by a singular experience he had with his father, which is to say his father took him hunting when he was a child. They went out into the mana waste with their black powder rifle. While they were hunting, that black powder rifle misfired, kicked back, and kills his father. So Gattlebee has this fear of black powder, this dangerous thing. That has driven him his whole life to want to come up with a safer solution to the what he looks as like a primitive explosive, the black powder. And that's why he is so much like heads down in his work. He doesn't see the bigger picture. Honestly, I don't think he cares about the bigger picture. He is more worried about how to invent something rather than the application of it. That's for other people to figure out. He just wants to contribute his way to what he sees as a problem in Alkenstar. So what I like to use with this is, right, when there's gunfire breaking out, as will often happen when he's assaulted, have him sort of ball up like a child, have him go catatonic, have him, not respond, have him be affected by the explosions around him as his mind is drawn back to the day his father died, and really have him know in his heart that what he's doing is right and important, and in no way could he be wrong for making this explosive. That's how I would picture and, use Vashon Gattlebee in my campaign. All right. Next faction that you might want to know about, the Powder Keg Punks. Who are they? Well, they're in the title of the book, right? It's called Punks in a Powder Keg. So when your PCs hear about the Powder Keg Punks, in a meta sense, they already know they're going to be important. But just who are they? Well, the Powder Keg Punks are basically a gang of crazy thrill seekers. That's the best way to put it. They're not organized. They just love to embrace the chaos. They love to burn things. They love to do crazy things. I imagine in my head, it's kind of very similar to the War Boys from Mad Max. The sort of witness me, spraying the chemical in their mouth, jumping to their death to do something to live on and be remembered. And sort of a cross between them and the Jackass crew from like the Jackass movies that just do crazy and wild things just to impress each other, right? Like, it's not safe. It's not reasonable. They even know what they're doing is stupid, but they still do it because it's fun and it raises their status within the crew. In this case, they've been hired to abduct Gattlebee, not by Mugland, right? Not by Loveless. Instead, by the Shuma character that I mentioned earlier. Shuma is convinced that Gattlebee stole his formula and wants to drag him there to make him admit it. But he's got no money, he's got no resources, so only thing he's good at is making explosives and alchemist fire and his version of what he thinks Pyronite is. So he goes to these Powder Keg Punks and gives them a bunch of alchemist fire and some gold and says, hey, actually not alchemist fire, it's called Lyserium, but it's basically alchemist fire. Gives it to them and says, hey, go bring Gattlebee to me and I'll give you a bunch more of this stuff. And they love explosions and fire and it seems fun. So that's what they do. They abduct Gattlebee on the road. This culminates in a place called Bottleneck Bridge and then leads into a huge chase throughout the city, which we will cover a little later in this video. But other than that, that's all there really is. They have a leader named Glaz Gilbrix, I think. Wait, let me look up real quick. Glaz Nibrix. Here's Glaz. He's a little, goblin with a robotic, inventor frame. And then the Powder Keg Punk Gunners. This is kind of what their artwork looks like. They have guns and bombs and etc. They're just know that they're there to drive the plot forward. Who the punks are don't really matter. Just know that they're crazy. Play them up in such a way that makes them memorable for your PCs. All right. Third faction you'll want to know about going into this chapter, the Clearwater Cleaners. Well, who the hell are the Clearwater Cleaners? It's a pretty random faction, right? It is, in a matter of fact. They are a group of bounty hunters hired by Loveless and, by extension, Muglin, who hires them to bring Gattlebee in. Are they meant to follow the law? Are they lawmen? Are they, in my mind, because it's not really explicitly said, they kind of work outside the law. And they're driven by their own code rather than the law, even though the leader, Dewey Daystar, kind of looks at himself as a sort of sheriff, and he's on the right side of history. Here he is. It's a cactus leshy with a flower for a badge and a holster with a wand of heal. and, spine shooting. Yeah, he thinks he's a cowboy, and he leads this band called the Clearwater Cleaners. They're a group of lushies who have a grudge against alchemists and other people who pollute and bring pollution into this world. And in Alkenstar, that's damn near everyone. So in this case, when they have a shot to, obtain Gattlebee, they take it. Now, this is the interesting part that's hard to convey in the story, but Lovelace hires them to bring in Gattlebee. She expects that they'll do what they're told, even though she knows they're capable, but generally she knows they might have a streak of doing, bad things or killing people rather than bringing them in. They are planning to betray Lovelace. So while Lovelace has hired them to abduct Gattlebee, they plan to kill Gattlebee and just report to Angelique that, there's an accident and he accidentally died. Pre-plan this. They have a note in his pocket. This is their way of sending messages to the rest of the alchemists in the city. Root of all beers, Leshy. So this is the Pathfinder module. Yes, in fact, this is Outlaws of Alkenstar is a Pathfinder 2E adventure path. And this is book 1 of 3, and this is called Punks in a Powder Keg. That is correct. So that's the Clearwater Cleaners. They show up later in they're like the boss of this chapter, and we'll cover their fight in a little bit. And last faction I need to mention is the Iron Hunters. Iron Hunters is a small faction currently holed up in the Yeast of All Brewery. They are aspiring adventurers who have so far hunted some very few monsters in the Mana Waste and the Ironside area of Alkenstar, with very little experience under their belt. Their leader, Kasali, is a powerful Nexian wizard who is trying to survive in a place where his magic just doesn't work, Alkenstar. And personally, I like to think of him kind of like Steed Bonnet from Our Flag Means Death, where he's leading a crew of people. He's got a ragtag group that don't quite fit in with the more proper adventurers. He's in way over his head, but he's trying his best, and he has a heart of gold. They make a very small appearance in the brewery. They're not even intended to be a combat challenge. My PCs did fight them and shoot one of them in the kneecap, and they all surrendered. Mostly they're there as a fun way to get some RP interaction and break up the kind of craziness that's going on with the rest of this chapter. But it is important to know because they're kind of glossed over. Just know that they've moved into this brewery. They're really here to make a name for themselves. And that's when they encounter your PCs who make their life pretty bad time. All right. So that is all the background information you need. That plus all the stuff we've talked about in earlier videos. If you know all of that, you'll be good to go and ready to run this chapter. So let's switch over real quick to the PDF so I can show you a little bit about the next part. This is the downtime prep. This chapter starts with Phoebe telling your PCs, hey, you have 4 days, and in 4 days' time, we need to extract Gattlebee from his house, get him back safe and sound. This is because at the end of chapter 1, the PC's running away, hear Angelique Lovelace telling somebody, in 5 days, we're grabbing Gattlebee. We're arresting him. We're falsifying charges. We have the judge on board. 5 days, we snatch him up. So the PCs know they have 4 days at most to grab him. Now, they can go earlier and get him. There's nothing stopping them. But there is a new downtime activity you unlock for them during this 4-day period called Scout a Route, which is over here on the side. And so for Scout a Route, you're spending half a day of your downtime. So 4 hours of the 8 hours a day. It's weird. What does half a down day mean? Either way, you're spending some of your time scouting routes, right? This allows them to earn prep points. I think it's cool to just be very upfront with your PCs in a game sense and say, hey, we are going to be, you have this downtime. You can craft if you want. You can do all this other stuff. But you can also spend some of your downtime preparing for this escort mission across the city by spending your time looking for threats, looking for paths, looking for danger, right? When you do this, you're going to need to track two things. One, you need to track individual prep points. That is to say, how many preparation points has each PC earned personally. Second, you need to earn how many prep points they've earned as a group. The reason for this is the individual prep points can be spent during the chase scene later to make them do better, increase their success by one step. So in Pathfinder, that means if you roll a failure, you can increase it to a success. If you roll a success, you can increase it to a critical success. You can even bump a critical failure up to a failure if you wanted to avoid losing points. But for every prep point they've earned, they get one increased success in that chase later. Note, all the DCs here are 15. That's sort of the certain level. You know, it gives basic ones, right? Athletics, perception, society, survival are the best ways to do it. But you know what? Feel free to, you know, let your PCs be creative, right? Maybe they're stealthing around. Maybe they're, you know, beating someone up or intimidating someone to get information out of them. I think mostly any skill here is acceptable as long as they can justify it in some way. And I would say at worst bump up the DC by 1 or 2. But I think just having this be a DC 15 activity, no matter what skill they use, probably makes sense to me. They can do 2 per day, so it'd be up to 8 checks per PC if they spend the entire time only preparing, which maybe they will, maybe not. But in addition to that, they also earn group points, and they come in buckets of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12, so it maxes out at 12 prep points as a group. So, you know, it basically just sort of drip feeds them information that should help them prepare easier, right? For 2 points, they learn about the poisonous plant outside of Gattlebee's house. Don't get poison from them. At 4 points, they learn about the Yeast of All Brewery being abandoned. At 6 points, they learn about Bottleneck Bridge, which is a little bit of a problematic location that we'll discuss in a bit, but that they realize if something's going to go down, it's going to go down at Bottleneck Bridge, and there's no way to avoid it in a sort of meta sense. They're forced down a path so an encounter can happen. At 8 points, they learn about potential, you know, maybe the Powder Keg Punks are kind of watching them, or somebody is watching them. At 10 points, they learn that there's going to be an ambush, and if they follow through on the ability to sort of send the marshals after these leads, they can remove some of the threats from that encounter. So it turns it from a severe to a moderate encounter if they spend enough time preparing. And lastly, at 12 points, because they do such a good job, they basically get +2 circumstance bonus to all checks during the case. And that's the ultimate payoff. And my players found this really cool that they were able to spend a bunch of time up front to prepare for all possible scenarios. And as we were kind of doing the chasings later, all those points were paying off and allowed them to breeze through the city, which makes sense. They spent so much time preparing, they should be ready to go. It was a lot of fun. So we'll cover the chase later, but that's basically how the chapter starts. 4 days downtime. Maybe you take 4 days to do 4 episodes to do 4 days of downtime. My players did. Maybe you go through the entire downtime set of rolls in, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Either way, 4 days pass, they're prepared. Now it's time to get the ball rolling. So this is where we got to pause again, right? Pause. The book assumes a certain order that things happen in. In this case, they assume you go do the downtime prep, then you go to Gattlebee's house, then you escort Gattlebee, then you go to the bridge, then you do the chase, then you end up at the brewery, then you fight the Clearwater Cleaners, and then the chapter ends and you level up to level 3. It's not always the way it goes, as I've heard the tale of many of the other GMs running it, and my players too. A lot of players treat it like a sandbox, right? So, hey, if they know that they got to go to the brewery, which Phoebe does tell them right off the top, What do you think they're going to do? They're going to go check out the brewery. So they might want to go scout it out. Sure, it's locked. That doesn't stop adventures. They might break in, right? Just be prepared that your players may go to the brewery right off the bat. And if they do, things are going to happen slightly out of order. Not a big deal. Thank you. I will hydrate Hallowed RPG. Redeeming a hydrate in chat. I know I was hydrating when you redeemed that, but I'll hydrate again. Just know you may be prepared to run the brewery first. A little interesting thing, when the PCs show up as written, the Iron Hunters have settled in there. They've been there for a few days, and they've already turned on the clockworks in the other room, and they're stuck, and they're fighting about what to do with it, right? Kasali doesn't want to leave with the threat, the robots a threat to the city, so he wants to take care of it. Half his crew wants to just leave and say it's somebody else's problem. The other half are backing their captain. It's a tense situation, right? If your PCs go there early, like mine did, feel free to have it earlier in the story. The Iron Hunters have just settled in. Maybe the Clockwork person is literally over there setting the robots right now and doing all of that, and kind of shift things a bit from written. It doesn't change much in terms of balance or anything like that, but it is a fun way to show that the world changes based on your PC's actions. So if they go earlier, it's a little bit different of a setup. In this case, also, if your PCs go there early, like mine did, they don't know what they're looking for. They just know that the Gattlebee is after something, right? In my case, I decided to throw some red herrings in for my PCs and make sure that they didn't know necessarily what they were looking for. So I threw a random stuffed animal. I threw like an old version of a Power Knight formula stuffed in a Destro somewhere. I threw one or two other sort of red herrings in so they could all think maybe this is what he wanted. And in the end, it's a wedding ring. It's a small silver wedding ring that is stuffed at the bottom of an old crate of onions that I assume, his ex threw in there when she was done with his bullshit and his obsession with Power Knight. So, like I said, order of operations, this is all flexible. I will cover it in the order that the book expects it to happen, but you should be flexible and react to what your players do. So, first stop, Vashon Gattlebee's house. Nice, awesome, beautiful battle map. My PC's tokens are here. Hello, PCM in chat. First time chatter, PCM. How are you doing? All right, Gattlebee's house. In terms of kind of how complex Gattlebee's house is, it's actually very straightforward, more than most of the stuff that happens here. It's a heavily trapped, right? Heavily trapped, but not deadly traps. It's not meant to kill people. It's meant to keep solicitors away, keep investors away, keep people that keep bothering him from doing his work away without killing them, right? If Gattlebee wanted to kill them, he could just Power Knight them. That's not what he wants. He just wants to shoo them away. So it's got a Thunderstone on the gate. It's got a Stink Sap right on the pressure plate as soon as you come in. Then there's like a dye trap that just coats you in purple dye that makes you, kind of like a bank when the bank heist and it shoots ink on you. That's how I imagine it's supposed to be like. And lastly, he's got a machine gun on his window, like mounted inside his windows on the porch, and it shoots wooden bullets, like hundreds of wooden bullets at anyone that tries to get there. Anyone that gets on their knees and crawls can crawl under it. It's just a funny sort of visual image. Nothing here is deadly. It just is supposed to reinforce the idea that this is a recluse that is tired of people messing with him. Once they finally get into the house, they come up the path. This is also the poison, right? If they go off the path and just go through any of these squares, they get exposed to the poison sedum, and that can potentially make them sick. If they learn to stay on the path, they kind of have to go into the traps. So it's kind of like a pick your poison thing. It's also a good time to make sure your PCs know about exploration activities and how searching works, so that let's look at a trap real quick, right? Because this trap, for instance, is a stealth DC 18 trained, because it has the train tag in Pathfinder rules, that means even if their perception is enough to automatically see this, they have to be taking the exploration activity search to even notice the trap or have trap finder as a feed or anything like that. So that means they should, at least one or two of them, after the first trap goes off, should actively search, and you can gently remind them that maybe you should consider searching so they even get the chance at the rolls. Okay, so once they get in, they get to the door, Gattlebee answers. Guess what? Just like we talked about earlier, he's insufferable. He doesn't want to be pulled away from his work. He just wants to, be left to work. I like to imagine he's one of those eccentric inventor types that even forgot he agreed to come. He's just so heads down his work. He's like, oh, is that day here already? I'm so close to a breakthrough. Treat him like Doc from Back to the Future or something like that. He doesn't want to be pulled away from his work. He's insufferable. Make sure that your PC's grown. They're like, oh my god, this guy sucks. Then what happens is he has a pet chameleon named Slick. Slick gets into some growth serum and grows huge. Turns into a large-sized creature. Gattlebee doesn't want anything to do with it. He's like, you can deal with this. Find the shrink serum. Disappears to his room, closes the door, lets the PCs deal with it, right? Important here to make sure your PCs know they don't have to kill it. You can do non-lethal attacks. You can subdue it. You can do many creative solutions here to not kill Gattlebee's pet, because if they kill him, Gattlebee won't be very happy with them, and their rewards are lessened by that. One thing your PCs are definitely going to want to do is to calm him down and control the animal. I would just say this falls into a very clear use of the let me just look at the compendium real quick. Command an animal, right? Command an animal is a built-in thing, one action that allows you to attempt a nature check against an animal's will DC to kind of give them a command. If the animal has a good attitude toward you, maybe it's lower. If it's aggressive, maybe it goes higher. You fail if the animal's hostile or unfriendly. In this case, Slick is not hostile, right? He's not trying to hurt anyone. He's just causing chaos. He can't control himself. His tail's knocking stuff over. So I would say his will DC as written is 18. I would say maybe due to the chaos, the DC should be somewhere around 20. If they're able to, let them make Slick calm downs for that turn, so when his turn initiative comes around, he doesn't do anything. He's more amicable to taking the growth serum, the reduction serum, shrink serum, if the PCs are able to find it, because that's part of the other mystery of this, is someone has to find the serum all around by looking or testing, and somebody's got to get it into the mouth by restraining him, putting him in a headlock, throwing it. All in all, it's a fun encounter. It's a lighthearted encounter. It's very juxtaposed versus the deadly assault that's coming in just a little bit. Have some fun with it. The only other thing I would say is there is a lab, and part of the lab is a hazard called volatile reagents that say basically on its turn a random 10-foot square bursts in Gattlebee's laboratory, dealing damage to anyone around it. Picking a random square on here is very rough and kind of hard to do. I say pick the most interesting spot for there to be an explosion. Perhaps somebody's over here, they think they're being safe, it explodes on them. Maybe somebody is just made a wise crack joke about somebody else failing something. Guess what? It explodes on them. Just pick a cool, interesting spot. Don't be a jerk. Don't have one of your PCs knocked over by the chameleon, go unconscious, explode and kill them. Make it dramatic, make it funny, and it'll be a better experience, I think. But probably isolate it to where these lab benches are. It doesn't really make sense for there to be an explosion down here in the corner in the middle of the room. Just let it be, a narratively make sense and be funny. As soon as that's done, Gattlebee's ready to go. Don't forget to give them the rewards. They can either get some elixirs, or they can get some. They have the ability to get, my pieces already alluded to this, but basically a bunch of alchemical consumables that Gattlebee gives them, including healing potions. And then we hit the road. We're off. We're on the streets of Alkenstar. Next stop, the aforementioned Bottleneck Bridge. Now, this is one of the most confusing parts of the adventure path, and one that we should really take some time to make sure we understand as a group, because it has some issues. So, let's start here with what Alkenstar looks like. Right here, this green circle, this is the Barrel and Bullet Saloon. This is where they're trying to get Gattlebee to. Right up here where the orange is, that's Gattlebee's house. The Yeast of All Brewery is not given a specific location. It's only told in text that it's on the west side near the eastern gate to the Ironside Corridor, which is generally somewhere around here, right? Because we're not shown where the gate is. I'm not sure where it is. If we assume it's down here in this section, then the path the PCs take looks something like this, right? Gattlebee's house, down here, through the city, over here to Yeast of All, double back to the thing, right? This orange line is roughly the sort of path that they take, right? But if you read the description for Bottleneck Bridge, it says it stretches over the Eustrati River with a distance of about 50 feet. Well, here's the problem. Let's look at the Eustrati River. This big rushing river is the Eustrati River, including the 500-foot drop here at Alkenstar Falls. And we see 2 major bridges here and 1 major bridge over here. Okay? If it's very much seems to me that it was kind of potentially intended to be these bridges. The numbers don't match up, right? This is way more than 50 feet. This is hundreds of feet long. It's a very major bridge. This definitely cannot be Bottleneck Bridge, even though you would think it would be, because their path has no reason to cross this river. But there's no other bridges in the city. There's this one here over this lake, but if you look at the path, it still doesn't make sense to go on this bridge, right? This is still way out of the way. So where the hell is Bottleneck Bridge? Personally, I like to think my headcanon is that originally Gattlebee lived maybe over here, and the PCs had to go to Skyside to pick up Gattlebee, cross the bridge back into the Yeast of All Brewery before going back to the saloon, and it was maybe changed in revision at some point. Or the map was never... This map's from 1E, so maybe it was just never updated to reflect the presence of the Bottleneck Bridge. The real answer is there's no real place that a bridge could work for Bottleneck Bridge. If you take this map to be literally. Let's get a little creative and let's say, hey, this bridge is not over the main Eustrati, but maybe there's a small rivulet, a small river that kind of comes through somewhere and the bridge goes over that. Vanessa, who wrote this adventure, kind of said that's how she envisioned it. Not to be the main part of the Eustrati, but a small rivulet somewhere else. Where can there be a spot on this path that reflects that? Well, that's this space here. And that is, this is the only place that it really makes sense for there to be a bridge. There's this small space here, right? I'm circling in orange. Small space here where there's not a lot of throughput, right? If there is road construction here, forcing everyone down a singular path, in this case the Bottleneck Bridge, and the only alternative is a long route around this lake, exposing you to more risk, this is where Bottleneck Bridge has to live. So, just know it's not this big bridge over the Eustrati. Bottleneck Bridge lives in some weird way here. There was some talks, and I think Spence from True Crit or Drunken Geek Podcast, I think it was Spence from Drunken Geek Podcast, did a version of this map where we flooded some of the streets, and Bottleneck Bridge is here. So consider that a potential place for Bottleneck Bridge in your game. We've also, recall knowledge, I've made a map called Bottleneck Alley, which has the same dimensions as the bridge, but it's an alley in the city instead of a bridge. You could use that as an option. Or, you know what? Just don't worry about it. Just let it go, right? It's not a big deal where it happens, right? It just matters that there is a bridge. Anyways, Bottleneck Bridge takes place right here. I'll load the map so you can see it real quick. It's a very simple fight. There's a bridge. It goes over the river. As written, there are 5 Powder Keg Punks, 3 gunners, and 2 bombers that make an appearance. I like to say, like, 2 flank from behind, 3 flank from the front. If your PCs get to the maximum prep points, they will remove some of these to make it a little bit easier of a fight. But they should be ambushed as they cross the bridge. The fight itself, the gunners are simple. The only thing I would say to keep in mind with the Powder Keg Punk bombers, the bombardiers, is it bombardier? Yeah. They have, they use alchemist fire. They have a weakness to fire, even though they themselves are super crazy about fire. So if they somehow take splash damage or they take fire damage, just know that they're going to burn even more than the average person. They also have quick bomber, so they can interact and draw a bomb and make a strike with it. Bombing run allows them to stride and make 2 strikes with the bombs during it. So they're just flinging bombs everywhere. Each one starts with 4 alchemist fire, so they could have 2 full rounds of just throwing alchemist fire before they then just start punching. They probably won't last more than that in terms of combat. But there's one other fun thing you can do here, which is not mentioned, it's not called out, but it makes sense, and it's a cool way to sort of foreshadow what's coming down the road. So, despite the fact that they use alchemist fire, in the story, what we've learned is that they are basically being supplied with this alchemist fire by Shuma, who makes something called Lyserium. Functionally, Lyserium is exactly identical to alchemist fire, except for A, it's twice as expensive, and B, it has no bulk. Like, instead of a light bulk, it's negligible bulk. So you could carry an infinite amount of this stuff because it's supposed to be a more compact version of alchemist fire. The only difference, really, is that it burns green instead of like normal alchemist fire. So this is a good time as your PCs are fighting to sort of put that in their mind as they throw the alchemist fire and as it explodes. Highlight the fact that it's green fire, that it burns green, that it's different, it's unique. What is it? Don't explain it, just plant that seed in their mind, and that helps foreshadow Shuma's involvement later. It pays off later in the campaign. It's a small minor thing. It's not called out at this point in the book at all. You don't learn about this stuff until later in the book, and by then it's too late. So just remember, they use green alchemist fire in this fight. Small tip, big payoff. Not big, medium payoff later, but still, cool little tip. All right, after the fight, Bottleneck Bridge ends. Okay, now the PCs have a choice because they're they get the note. Make sure they get the note right on their body. There's like a note they get that leads them to a clue later on. More Powder Keg Punks descend on the bridge. Vashon gets scared, hightails it. The PCs have a choice to make. They can stand and fight, and if they do, they stay here on the bridge and face down another wave of Powder Keg Punks, or they can run, and this is where their prep points come in because we go into a chase sequence. So let's first just do a quick familiarity check with how chases work in Pathfinder. A chase involves all the PCs and something else. Either the PCs are chasing something, something's chasing the PC, or they're running away from something. In this case, the Powder Keg Punks are chasing the PCs who are trying to get away from them on like the map. The PCs will overcome obstacles. They'll be faced with an obstacle, and that obstacle will have a certain number of chase points you need to overcome to move on to the next obstacle in the chase, or and each obstacle will have a set level of DCs that can be used to pass it. If we just say like there's a DC 15 check of some sort, if you get a success on your check, you get 1 chase point. If you get a critical success, you get 2 chase points. If you get a critical failure, that's -1 chase points. So the PCs are all the PCs will go in any order they want, right? You describe the obstacle, have them sort of free form it. Remember, we're not in 6-second combat increments. It's fluctuating. The amount of time is not so strict. It's more, whatever's interesting, and In this case, it's a chase across the city, so it's meant to be like a long amount of time. So let them be flexible with the skills. Describe the scene. Let them get creative. Know that you will always have like baseline reference for you as a GM to say what skill does what. If they choose something that sounds interesting but maybe doesn't quite fit, just bump the DC up a little bit and let them try. If they describe something that makes perfect sense, use the set DCs for the easiest skill checks that you already have as a level. I made what I thought was really cool, and I'll share it here. I made a chase map. This is our chase map that we used in the game. In this chase, there were 6 locations. So Bottleneck Bridge is where it starts. It goes to Busy Marketplace. It's supposed to be a parade here, but I put a labor march because it fit our game better. Road construction, showdown in the street, and ends at a structure fire. So with this setup, and I have walls around each of these pictures, so when the chase starts, I can put the PC in this box, and all they see is what they're at. It has a little picture here. It has the name of the location where they're at. It has this chase point on the bottom, which is editable. So right now it says 3 out of 3 because they got all their chase points, but it starts at 0 out of 3 chase points. You can edit that so they know how many points they have. And I even have each obstacle as its own journal entry. And if they want to say, you know, force their way through the crowd, I can dump that into chat. They can make their check. I like this setup. The feedback I got from my players was that it helped them stay in the moment, so I didn't have to keep describing where they were, what obstacle they were going up against. It really just helped them enjoy the chase more and a good visual aid, and they can just see where they are, right? As they move from obstacle to obstacle, I can just drag them to the next obstacle, and then they know they're in a busy marketplace. And when I had like the Powder Keg Punks, I can track them separately, so I know they're 1 obstacle behind, they're 2 obstacles behind, 3 obstacles behind. Pretty cool. So if you like this, make sure to hop into our Discord, because I will share it there with you. Go to the GM Prep channel. If I haven't posted it recently, or if you can't find it, ask for it, and I'll share it. I did share it in a couple of other Discords. I think I'll probably post it on our Patreon as a free post so everyone can get access to it. But it's just a fun little way to give you a visual way to do chases in the virtual tabletop. Everyone I've shown it to, everyone who's used it, has given really good feedback. If you haven't run this yet, consider it. The only difference, right, I have 2 versions, one with this labor march we use for our game, and one with the parade, which fits the theme of as written. It's meant to be a parade. This whole thing should run fast and loose. Let your players have fun solving all of the obstacles. Keep it rolling. You know, don't let them get like so bogged down in making the perfect choice. Just let them be creative. Let them do something silly. We had a player that like grabbed a rope, grabbed 2 ropes, jumped up onto a beam in the construction site, and Naruto ran across and jumped down and was able to make like ropes pass so the rest of the PCs could go up and make it across safe, right? That's silly. That's fun. That sounds creative. He made an awesome check. He was able to bump it up to a critical success because of the prep points he spent earlier, and the scene kept rolling. We had a PC that has an investigator that has no cause for alarm, which is the 3 action ability that allows you to sort of calm people down and attempt to stop them from being scared, right? In this case, at Bottleneck Bridge, right at the end of the fight when people were chaotic and scared, he was able to calm everyone down. Or perhaps that was at the busy marketplace. I'm not sure which. Anyways, I let him use that skill and can automatically earn a success to move on to the next thing without a check because it fit the character, it fit the ability. Let them be creative, reward the creativity. Don't get so bogged down in the details. Make sure this thing runs fast. And that is my take on the chase scene. All right. The last location in this chapter, the Yeast of All Brewery. And here is the Yeast of All Brewery in all its glory. There's a front. They're meant to come through the front door. They can technically come through the side door, although all these crates have been pushed up against the wall to block it by the Iron Hunters, who have made this their sort of campsite. So This is where the climax of our adventure takes place. Whether they've come here for the first time with Gattlebee in tow, or whether they've already scattered out, they come and do this earlier and come back later. Even if they cleared it out earlier, chances are they're coming back for the final showdown with Dewey, Daystar. But there's a lot going on here. This is, it's a dungeon, right? It's a room by room crawl. There's a lot of combat threats in a small space. By all, accounts, this is a dungeon. So, a couple things important that your players, everyone may want to know. You may be coming off Chapter 1 Rust Ooze fight, and you and your players may have post-traumatic stress from that fight. There are 2 oozes here. This is a fun ooze, though, unlike the Rust Ooze, which is basically, if you don't have the right party composition, it's like lights out. This is a Yeast Ooze, and it lives in the vats. And the Yeast Ooze is a lot less scary than the Rust Ooze, I will say. They can still cause problems. So let's talk about their abilities, right? They're critical hit immune. They have precision damage immunity, so a lot of your rogues and investigators and stuff are going to have a hard time. Gunslingers are not going to be able to blast them too much. We talked about it before. What does critical hit immunity actually mean? Do you not double the dice? Do you double the dice? It's up to you as a GM. I think I'll say the same thing I said before. I think it's definitely intended to just roll the damage and not double the damage, because they're critical hit immune. It makes sense. There's nothing to critically hit. We talked about it as written. Technically, you do everything. You definitely don't double the dice, but all other effects like the deadly that increases your damage from D4s, D10s perhaps, should trigger as written. I still disagree with that on a fundamental logic level. Anyways, even if you don't run it like that, just note this is not resist all metal like the Rust Ooze. It has 5 slashing resistance and 5 piercing resistance, but 5 bludgeoning weakness. Getting up there, punching it, hitting it with clubs, all that's going to help tear this down so much more. In addition to the cold, if they have cold damage for some reason, they can deal a bit extra damage. It only has 60 hit points. There's 2. It's easy to hit. These things go down much easier than the Rust Ooze. They should be... I think that what's going to happen is they're going to see the ooze. They're going to freak out again because it's another ooze. They're going to curse Vanessa, like, curse you, Vanessa, and then they're going to deal with it just fine. Even my party, who is completely ill-equipped to handle oozes, handled this with flying colors. The other thing is, the oozes, since they're kind of out of the way and they only really get triggered if someone comes over to them and, like, has motion sense, you can manually trigger these in the fight with Dewey later. Just have somebody flee over here, and then the ooze joins the middle of the fight. Now, be aware that the Dewey fight is dangerous enough on its own that you probably don't want to do that, because they can get a little chaotic. But if things are going bad, the oozes can come out and attack Dewey and save your party, perhaps, if they don't trigger it like mine did. The biggest threat that these things have is the monstrous yeast, which is a disease. So if they make contact with their pseudopod, then they add this fortitude saving throw. If they fail, they're going to be flat-footed for an hour, which means someone like Dewey is going to really tear through them. It can go enfeebled all the way up. Like, this is a dangerous thing. The fortitude save is pretty high. Really, they need to avoid getting hit, right? Because they're not going to be able to treat the disease in a short term. So they need to stay away, deal the damage. But, let the cards fall where they may. Oh, yeah. Speaking of rough fights, guess what? If your party can't handle oozes, they probably can't handle swarms either. And guess what we have? A swarm of wasps. So just like the graveyard, which had the swarm of cockroaches and a rust ooze, here we got 2 yeast oozes and a wasp swarm. Vanessa really loves punishing their players. I think she loves making them squirm. So this wasp swarm can definitely cause some issues because it does not have an attack. It moves its body over 4 squares, and it uses the swarming stings action, which causes everyone to make a DC 21 basic reflex save. DC 21 at this level is very hard to hit. For instance, let's look at let's look at my investigator, Saruk. With a reflex save of 7, that means they only successfully save on a 14 or higher. That's chances are they're not going to save. They're going to be taking 2d8 piercing multiple times in a turn, because guess what? There's no multiple attack penalty. You can just swarming stings. Maybe they fly, 20-foot speed. They got a 40-foot speed to fly. If your PCs do not spread out, they are going to be chewed through so fast, it's not even funny, especially because they have resistance 7 to bludgeoning and piercing, and only weaknesses to splash damage. Hopefully they stocked up and they learned from the graveyard. This Wasp Swarm could easily TPK your party if you're not careful, but as a GM, we don't want that to happen unless it makes sense. So remember, they're not hostile per se. They have no reason to chase PCs down and finish them off. All they want to do is defend their territory, right? So if somebody is in this room, it says, the wasps attack any living creature and fight until their swarm is destroyed. I think if the PCs move out of the room, close the door, that's it. They can run away. The wasp swarm's not going to follow after them. This is more of a side bonus room. They can earn 50 gold treasure for the alchemist lab in here. But they don't have to fight this, and make sure that they realize they can run away, and don't punish them by having the wasps just come out and keep fighting them. Also, creative solutions. There's this cold storage room that has a device that puts off the cold thing. You know what happens when wasps and bees get cold? They hibernate. So if they're able to sort of bring that cold over here and put it in the room, have the swarm either go to sleep or flee and abandon, right? They're not smart enough to realize, the PCs are behind it. They just know it's getting cold. Playing like a swarm, defending their territory, and not an aggressive apex predator, and it's going to go a little bit easier for you and your party. Right. Oh, speaking of the cold storage solution, one of the treasures you get from in there is a wand of chilling spray. Basically, it says if you disable the device and get it in your hand, it can function as a wand of chilling spray, right? Now, a wand of chilling spray lets you use magic if that spell's on your spell list. If you're running a low magic setting like I am and a lot of other GMs are, your PCs are not going to have access to the spells, and using it as a wand of chilling spray is not going to be useful. So two solutions. One, let it function as a wand, but you don't need the spell in your spell list. It's like a magical item. You're activating the magical item. Anyone can do chilling spray. Two, which is what I did, is allow them to then extract the cold from the device and make consumables. If you do 6 moderate frost vials, it comes out to be the same gold value as a level 1 wand, which is 60 gold. So make them make the crafting check. If they succeed, they can get up to 6 doses of the frost vial moderates, which fits that low magic, high alchemy theme of Alkenstar better. Or if you're just running it as magic as is, just flavor that cool device as a wand, and that's cool. That's my suggestion for this if you're running it like me. Clockwork Brewers are actually the first thing they're probably going to interact with, which is they come in the front door and we have these Clockwork Brewers, right? Really fun imagery. One of my favorite Clockworks. Vanessa had fun with this one, I'm sure, which is to say, it's literally a brewing machine that can function as a bartender that's full of liquid. In this case, it's full of smoke side sour, which is an old alcohol that has gone bad because it's been sitting here for so long. The hoses, it walks around on the hoses. It can grapple with the hoses. It can lash things with the hoses. In terms of its fun abilities, is this pre-programmed greeting. So Clockworks are mindless. They do not have the ability to think. They just follow patterns and pre-programmed stuff. These Clockwork Brewers are programmed with voice lines, technically from Amory, Amory, the dwarven woman owner, Gattlebee's ex, and from Gattlebee. You could use Gattlebee's voice. You can use Amory's voice here in these things. You can have fun with it, like welcome to the Yeast of All Brewery, and as it's like trying to murder them, right? Juxtapose the craziness of what's going on with the absurdity of these pre-programmed nice greetings as you make them make the will saves against the craziness, right? Um, it's just a good time to have fun with that. I like how it's so lighthearted. There's so many fun little things in here. Um, for the combat specs on these things, though, they're level 3. Your PCs are fighting 2 of them. It's a severe fight, right? And they're probably coming in and just being ambushed by this. It's a severe fight. It's no joke. Um, because they are clockworks, they have the physical 3 resistance. They also have weaknesses to electricity and calcium, which chalcum, how do you say it? Chalcum. You're not going to have that. It's a very high level thing. It doesn't matter. The only weakness they have is electricity. They are a tough thing. They only have 40 hit points, so they're not super hard to deal with. They have decent AC. So my suggestion is, instead of running them as most efficient dealing damage as possible, and you can wing this based on how the fight's going, use some of these fun thematic abilities more than trying to deal the most damage. So let's just go through the optimal sort of thing, right? They have the melee attack, +9, 2d4 +4 damage. It has the grab trait. You can hit someone. If you do, you spend an action. You've wrapped them up. Now they're grabbed. When they're grabbed, there's an action called bottoms up, which means whatever liquid it has inside of them, in this case, it's, the smoke side sour by default. You take the tube, shove it in their mouth, and force feed them an entire serving of whatever alcohol they have, forcing them to make the fortitude save. Is that better than dealing damage with another attack? No, I seriously doubt it. Is it funnier and more flavorful and more memorable to force feed the tank a thing of alcohol and potentially having them get drunk in the middle of the fight and become clumsy? Absolutely. So feel free to do this sort of thing. Grab, force feed, maybe 1 attack per creature per round of combat, unless they're really just making short work of them, and then you can feel free to try to maybe make it a little more dangerous. But make sure, I think you want to make sure to use all of these abilities so they're not just another clockwork fighting thing, right? They'll remember the time the cool stuff happened. That's the clockwork things. That sets the tone for the entirety of the fight. The only other thing that's here is the Iron Hunters, right? They live in this warehouse room in the back. We got, this is Kasali, who's the Nexian wizard, who's their leader. Remember, he's like, I like to think of him as an in over his head person. He's got the fancy clothes. He obviously doesn't fit in this rundown portion of town, but he's trying his best to keep his crew from falling apart. What happened story-wise is that the Iron Hunters here came over here and found these deactivated Clockwork Brewers. The engineer turned them on, fixed them, got them running, and told them to basically defend. What is it? Defend the place, like attack anyone she sees. Oh wait, it says she reactivated the Clockwork Brewers to take them on as mechanical means, but couldn't fix their malfunctioning hardware. They now attack anyone on site. So now they're a danger to anyone who enters the tap room until they're destroyed. So the hunters have triggered these, and now they're half the crew's like, let's get out of here. The leader and the other half are like, no, we're here to make the city better, not worse. We can't leave it in this state. But they're not combat capable of taking it down. Clockworks wind down after 24 hours, but it specifically says that they wind each other up. So they've invented perpetual energy. Apparently, they can wind themselves up and last forever. Don't question it. Just roll with it. And that's when the PCs are able to come in. If they take care of the Clockwork Brewers, it'll improve their standing with this faction. They can take a rest here while the people watch over them. But it's worth noting they will not get involved in combat no matter what, whether it's the Clockwork Brewers, whether it's like the Wasps, all of that. They're not intended to be combat aids here. They're just intended to be fun RP aids. And if the fight breaks out, use the counter stat block, let your PC shine. They'll bend the knee, they'll do whatever your PCs want because they are absolute pushovers. Okay. That brings us to one last topic. Well, one last character here. That is none other than our favorite Leshy. And actually the second Leshy in this adventure. I don't know why Vanessa likes Leshy so much, but apparently she does. Dewey Daystar. Looks like a sheriff. He's got a monocle. He's got a holster. He's got a flower. This one is actually interesting, right? This is the fight I ran this week. We ran the Dewey Daystar fight. It went longer than I thought, and it was actually much harder than I thought. When I saw this, I was like, this is going to be a pushover fight. I know other groups have run it and said it's a pushover. Oh my god, you guys. My PCs were close to dying. This is probably, other than the Rustu's, this is the toughest fight that they've had to face. So let me show you why, and some things you might have overlooked, and part of the reason why I think it's best that I wait to give advice until I've run it, so I can share from what happened in my games. So, this fight is listed as severe. It definitely is. Off the bat, we need to address the elephant in the room. Dewey is a magic user. And if you set up this world as being one where magic doesn't work, then you have to explain why Dewey is able to use magic. Dewey is, however, he's a primal caster. And it doesn't say here, but he's a primal prepared caster. So each spell he has prepared, he can cast once, right? He's a cactus leshy, so he has spines on his body. So if someone grabs him or touches him, they're going to get spined. But he's a caster. So there is a loophole here a little bit, depending on how creative you want to get. In Pathfinder 1st edition, it was stated that primal magic did work in Alkenstar, and it was not too unpredictable, and even the Ostrati River helped harness some of that primal energy. That being said, primal magic in 1st edition is more akin to like Wellspring wild magic than the nature-based magic that is here. So if you want to explain this to your players, just say, hey, they're using primal magic. Primal magic does work. That being said, it's fair to use Wellspring magic, right? Wellspring magic can basically do Wellspring surges and have a little bit of unpredictability happen. The base thing I would say is do a DC 6 flat check every time you cast a spell. If the spell goes off, do a Wellspring surge, roll the Wellspring surge, and see what happens. In my case, Dewey cast 3 spells. He got 2 Wellspring surges, and 1 healed people, 1 hurt people, and it was, it was a lot of fun. But if you're just running Alkenstar magic as it works normally, great. You don't have to worry about explaining why this works. Druid with the name file off. Yeah, he's basically a gunslinger druid, right? He's definitely got some flair and some style. So, Dewey. If you look at his spells, right? Remember, he has prepared, so he can only cast each one of these first level spells once each. He's got heal. He's got hydraulic push, which allows him to do like an attack and push someone back. But the real spell and the reason why he's dangerous is Magic Fang. Magic Fang is a 2-action spell. You can choose one of the target's unarmed attacks, and it makes it a +1 striking unarmed attack. One thing I noticed, though, there is no effect that I can drag and drop to the NPC. So after he cast it, I had to go in and edit his attack to actually do the extra attack modifier and extra damage here. But 2d8, like 2d6 range piercing damage is a lot at 2nd level. And if it crits, it just goes off the charts even crazier. Little tip I learned: if you monologue at the top of his turn about how he's doing the right thing and how he's punishing those who would, protect such a foul person like Gattlebee, you're guaranteed to roll natural 20s. I rolled 3 attacks with the spines in one turn and got 2 natural 20s, the first and the last roll. Downed 1 PC, took someone down to like 3 health. Yeah, just monologue. You're guaranteed to roll natural 20s. But he's got a solid hit, +8. There's a good chance he crits on people. And when he does, he's dealing, like, let's say, let me just roll critical damage real quick, right? This is an average roll, 7. He deals 20 points of damage. That's enough to take down the non-tanky classes. Don't sleep on Magic Fang. And he can do it from range. One thing that's kind of easy to miss, and that is the Clearwater Cleaners. They're Lushies as well. They have the Verdant Burst ability, which you first saw in the graveyard in Chapter 1, so the PCs shouldn't be... What'll happen is they'll forget, and they'll kill one, and they'll go, oh yeah, shit, I forgot about that. When they die, they burst in a 30-foot emanation. It heals plants for 1d4, so they heal each other, and it now makes it difficult terrain. Let me just show you how much space 30-foot emanation is from this creature. If they die here, this half of the room is now difficult terrain. If your PCs kill one of these pretty quickly, which as a level 0 creature with 13 hit points and a low AC, they die really fast. The room is now difficult terrain. Dewey doesn't care because he's ranged. He's standing in the back. He's flinging spells. He's shooting his spines. Roxy, his Drake, which I'll talk about in a second, can fly over it and rain breath fire attacks on the enemies. Your PCs that rely on being up close, like the Inventor Robot or the Investigator or the Fighter with the Kopesh, they're going to have a hard time getting across the difficult terrain for the rest of the fight. So that combination of the difficult terrain combined with the Drake able to avoid it, and Dewey, who doesn't really mind being at range and prefers to be at range, is sort of a perfect storm. It's a very well-balanced encounter where the sum of its parts, like the sum of all the parts is greater than each individual piece, right? They go together nicely. As written as well, the cleaners are only here to guard and make sure people don't escape. If they need to do an attack, they can make their hands into spears to give them a little bit extra range, which is it's not only flavorful, but it's also cool. It's a cool sort of ability they have, and actually gives them reach in the difficult terrain. That helps. But they have this Heft Crate ability, which allows them to, for 2 actions, throw a crate 15 feet, 5-foot burst, 2d6 bludgeoning damage. The reflex save is low, which is good because this is a lot of damage, but it allows them to just hammer people with damage and attack safely from range. So your PCs have to get creative. There's a good chance they can go down. The fight is very memorable, though. The only one I didn't talk about is Roxy. Roxy is a prairie drake who is Vanessa's favorite creature in this adventure path that she wrote. He's just a little drake. He got like the sort of like neck that like expands. He thinks he's a dragon, but she is a pretty weak dragon. Her Dirt Breath ability does, steal the show. It is a dragon breath attack. It's only a 5-foot burst, so there's a lot of burst attacks in this fight. Your PCs have to learn to spread out. 5-foot burst, 3d6 damage on a reflex save, right? That's a solid chunk of damage. And the reflex save is pretty high, so your PCs are probably taking it. And there's a good chance somebody's going to roll low enough to critically fail. Don't sleep on this ability. Know that he has a speed of 25, a burrow of 20, which I don't think applies here because the ground is concrete. Probably can't burrow. But for the flying ability, even though his fly is only 10 feet, the fact that he can avoid the difficult terrain and sort of fly up and harass people from the sky, that's some really cool imagery. This room is big. We already know it has tall ceilings with the light coming in. Have the Drake go up in the air, move around, attack them from above, breathe on them when they can, harass them, force the range people to attack up. We had a cool moment where our inventor had strapped blast boots on their feet, so they were able to use the blast boots to jump up in the air and try to grab the Drake and to wrestle it to the ground. It was an amazing moment, and it was more fun than just like static move around and attack, right? Even if it wasn't optimal, I don't know if it is, it was iconic and fun. She didn't make the grab because the the creature has a fortitude save of DC 20 when she had no bonus to her strength, so it didn't work, but I love that she tried. It was really fun. And just give your PCs a chance for shenanigans like that. But when all that is said and done, and finally the Clearwater cleaners have been dealt with, the PCs are home free. They're able to return to base. They're able to secure Gattlebee, who doesn't help in this fight because he's not combat capable. He just cowers and hides the whole time. And all he wanted was his wedding ring in the end. That's basically the end of the entire chapter. I rushed through and covered everything I felt was important. Nothing in terms of combat, nothing is too confusing. I think the one thing that really surprised me was how much all the pieces worked together really well in the fight with Dewey Daystar. So you should definitely don't be caught off guard by that. The Magic Fang is really the piece that pulled all of that together to work. If you want to be really mean, let Magic Fang enhance all of Dewey's unarmed attacks and not just his ranged one. That would probably be even meaner, but it makes sense. It's an unarmed strike. I've covered everything I planned to cover today over the last, how long have we been going? Almost an hour and a half now. If anyone in chat is running this, if there's anything in this chapter or even an earlier chapter that maybe you were unclear on, unconfused about, or just wanted some advice, make sure to ask. Right now is a good time to ask any questions. I will answer. I'll once again in chat, I will put the link to our Discord. Discord's the best way to get a hold of us, hold of me and other GMs that are running it in between sessions. Head on over to our GM Prep Alkenstar channel to chat about this video, other videos, what's going on in your game. We're all excited to help each other. Another big shout out before we head out, the patrons that make all of this possible, everyone that supports us here at Recall Knowledge on Patreon: David Sims, Jason Irvin, Mikkel Waltz, Mark Paquette, Sandra Wagner, Derek Southworth. You guys are awesome. This video is not possible without your support. It doesn't look like we have any immediate questions. I know we talked a little bit with some of the chat during it. Feel free, if you're watching this on YouTube, comment down below. I love to respond to the comments, and so does the rest of the cast. Hit us up in Discord. As I said, we're kind of changing the cadence of this. I will do the next GM Prep video when we finish the next chapter. In this case, that would be the end of chapter 3, which is going to be when I'm done with book 1. It may be 3 weeks. It might be a month. I'm probably guessing somewhere between a month and a half for the next one. So reach out in the other ways between now and then to get any help you might want. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and shout out everyone who was chatting tonight, especially our first-time chatters. ML Radish. We had Richard, RK Richard RPG. We had Root of All Beers. We had PCM. We had SW Adir. Swadir. Is that Shark? Walks like man? No, that's Switlam. We had a lot of people who've been chatting tonight. Thanks for stopping in. I'm going to dip out. I hope you found this video informative, interesting. Go down below, actually like it, share it around. YouTube thrives on the comments and the likes. So if you can, like, comment, spread the love. I appreciate you checking out this video. Until next time, make sure you guys stay safe and stay healthy, and I'll see you in Alkenstar. Bye, everyone. Hi, Steve from Recall Knowledge here. If you enjoyed this content, please make sure to like and subscribe down below so you can get notified of more awesome content coming your way. Also, make sure to follow our channel's Twitter at Recall Knowledge for the latest information. Thanks for watching.